This is another question I see come up fairly often, which is that someone's got a aftermarket wideband controller which gives an analog output, and they've connected that into an analog input on the ECU, and they're getting noise on the system here. And unfortunately, some of the advice on Facebook has been, in response to this person, to connect their wideband controller to sensor ground instead of to power ground. I'm going to show you why that's not going to work and what the problem is for that. So we've got our ECU, we've got our AVI, and we've got our sensor ground, and we've got our power ground. Now, on the video I did before showing the sensor ground loops and why that's a problem, the whole thing is that you only want, this is really just supposed to be reference voltage, so you can have things like, you know, a TPS here, for example, and then the current that the TPS is going to draw is going to be milliamps, you know, and same if you've got a map sensor and oil pressure or fuel pressure sensors or things like that. So because there's only a very small amount of current, the voltage offset that you get on this pin compared to the power ground within the ECU is very low. The problem, if you read this person's post, is that he's wired the ECU. I'm not sure where he's grounded the ECU. It could be at the engine, it could be at the battery, who knows. But he's got his wideband gauge, and grounded that to the battery. So we don't know what the voltage offset is between wherever the ECU is grounded and wherever the gauge is grounded, but it's enough that when he gets the analog output of this, the ECU is not seeing a constant voltage here because the ground offset's different. So unfortunately, people have been suggesting wire it to the sensor ground instead. The problem with that is that this is not just a sensor, this is actually a controller. It goes to a wideband sensor, and the sensor's got a heater in it. And the heater draws, you know, 2 to 3 amps when it's starting up, when it's cold. So you'll actually have a fairly decent current there. The other problem is that the heater is pulse width modulated, which means that the current here is going to be pulsy as well. And so it's going to inject noise on all your analog signals. It's the same as having a ground loop. You just don't want to do it. So the best thing that you could do in this situation is ground. You don't do that. You ground the wideband controller to the ECU's ground in the harness, and that will give you the lowest chance of having an offset. But ultimately I don't like this because you just have an analog voltage here which you can program with different lambda values, but for all the things that could go wrong with the sensor, the ECU doesn't know about that. So even just the sensor being cold, you know, when it starts up, we need, there's also things that can go wrong, like the sensor can be open circuit, damaged, can the heater open circuit, this could just be disconnected altogether. So all these problems can occur, and they all look the same. They're all within legal range of this analog voltage input, so the ECU doesn't know about them. The best thing to do is to use a CAN input, and this particular person is talking about an Innovate gauge, and when I used the Innovate gauges and sold them, I used the serial output because that does actually tell you if the sensor's got a valid reading or not. The Haltech ECUs don't have a serial input on them, so you can really only use the analog output for that. But if you use a Haltech WB1 or WB2, then you can, the CAN data tells you all the different faults that could be with the sensor, like if it's cold or open circuit, or if the sensor's damaged, if it's uncalibrated, or the wrong type of sensor's plugged in, or something like that. So that's why I recommend using a CAN connection. Using an ECU with an internal a wideband controller like an R3 or an R5 is even better, of course. Yeah, so that would be my recommendation there. But yeah, unfortunately, if you're using an analog output, there's some things you can do, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have those limitations.